just give us a brief rundown on where you were at the time the tour was on your farm in 2014 and where you've come from in the intervening time, please.
Okay, in 2014 we had 64 hectares, we were milking 140 cows, we had all our calves on the farm, our replacement heifers, maiden heifers were being contract reared, and there was a small sheep enterprise on the farm. Since that time we've moved to 150 cows at the moment. We have milked more in the intervening period, but we've settled at 150 at the moment. All replacements are being contract reared in Kilkenny, and the small sheep flock remains. So.
Sheep flock.
Yeah.
So just on the contract rearing, I suppose, as you said, you'd moved from a partial kind of contract rearing arrangement in 2014 to full contract rearing, and you're very clear in the conversations that I've had with you in preparation for this about how important that contract rearing arrangement is for you. I suppose first thing I'd ask you is, Kilkenny's a little step away from County Laois. How did you come across a person for contract rearing that was that bit of a distance away? Does it bother you? And we'll say, again, just to outline how important that is to your business and how you've described it to us as how your contract rearer now drives your business for you.
Well, we're actually contract rearing for 11 years at this stage. The maiden heifers left the farm 11 years ago, and the heifer calves left the farm in 2015. It was quite hard to source a contract rearer 11 years ago. There wasn't too many at it. I happened to source a guy who had been working at it abroad, and he wanted a job along with what he was doing at that time. So I was with him for 5 years. He got to the stage where they had expanded their own dairy farm at home, and he couldn't contract her anymore. So he recommended another man actually in the same parish, and I've been with that man ever since. Both guys are really, really good. The guy I'm with at the moment is probably it's preferable to the fact he has significant winter housing, which actually helped our farm in the sense that he can house the heifers and we don't bring them home until 10 days before calving. He's doing an exceptional job rearing the stock. If you get well-grown replacement heifers onto your farm from whatever source, they're going to hit the ground running as regards production and fertility. And that's what he's doing at the moment, and we're very, very happy with that arrangement.
Okay, so the contract rearing freed up land on your own block, we'll say, obviously, to milk cows, and you have said in your videos that you have the capacity to go to maybe 170, potentially even 180 cows. I suppose the question that I'd have for you is, how come you haven't gone there already? Now, you said you've milked a few more already, but you've settled at the 150, 55 mark currently.
Well, in 2014, we had a fairly significant soil fertility issue. We soil tested in 2013, and the biggest mistake was we hadn't soil tested for 4 years, and then discovered that we had an issue which was going to take some time to solve. We milked some extra cows, but we were just actually buying extra purchase feed in the form of forage to fill the gap because we weren't growing the grass. So we settled back at 150 for the last couple of years, but we have solved the soil fertility issue, and we're reseeding now. We've reseeded 17% of the farm over the last 2 years. We can see the surge of grass coming there at the moment, and I expect that we'll go for the 10% extra cows next year, comfortable in the knowledge that we can grow the winter feed without purchasing anything significant from outside the farm.
So you've seen the benefit already of the reseeding program that you've implemented?
Yeah, we've reseeded with the Aberchoice and Abergain standard ryegrass mixtures with white clover on the field that we reseeded this year, and it's exceptional when you see the actual performance from the reseeded pastures, assuming the soil fertility is good. But we saw no point in doing any great reseeding until the soil fertility issue was solved first. So then we could actually reseed fields that would get real bang for our buck and take out the fields that were performing poorly at the bottom of the ladder.
Okay, very good. So Henry, I'll come to you now. Like David was of the opinion that he hadn't changed much, but he was changing a lot of things underneath. I suppose yourself and Enda have changed a lot of things physically on the ground and also increased numbers as well. So will you just outline your situation since the tour in 2015?
Yeah, we hosted the tour in 2015. At that stage, it was just the Enda quotas. We had expanded the herd from 200 to 240 in that particular year. But in reality, that was, I suppose, a culmination of as much as 20 years of expansion in that we'd been working away since I was milking 50 cows in 1996. We had continuously lifted numbers through lease and otherwise, through extra land, luckily becoming available to us to lease on the adjacent to the milking platform, and through growing more grass. That time we were very, very focused because we'd no winter housing on winter blocks, extending the winterage, I would say extending the grazing season, if you want to describe it as that, to become winter blocks that we could outwinter the animals, and it allowed us to plough pretty much all of our resources into extra livestock, growing extra tons of grass. And at that time we had a 16-unit milking facility that was more than adequate throughout all the early years, but came under incredible pressure because of the amount of rows of cows we were milking at the very end. Prior to our recent changes, we were milking 18 lines of cows. So coinciding, I suppose, with Enda completing college in dairy business in Dublin, and addressing the kind of the next generation and succession, if you want to put it that way, we made a decision that the infrastructure wasn't adequate, in particular the milking facilities or the housing facilities, as we continue to expand dairy cow numbers. So this year we got to 320. We've settled back a few through, culling a few problem cows and so on like that. So this year we got to 320 cows, and that's probably where we'll settle, at 4 cows to the hectare. And it's based on growing the amount of grass we grow, and we import all winter feed from outside. And we're also importing a certain amount of round bales for feeding during the lactating period that the cows are milking from the outside blocks.
Just to clarify, so when you say that you're importing it from, it's actually from ground that you're farming outside,
Yeah,
but it's just coming off from outside of the platform?
Correct, Stuart.
Okay.
We're lucky enough that we have a lot of land available to us outside to lease. And I suppose the drawback with that is that it's not available as milking platform. So this is where the real trade-off is coming for us in terms of, ideally we'd like to be stocked at 3 cows to the hectare, maybe even 2.9. But the milking platform is not of a scale to allow that, whereas we have a lot of support land and we're trying to utilise it as best we can. And at this point, we've put in a fantastic new milking facility, a 50-pint rotary parlour. We've increased our cubicles, so we've excellent wintering facilities. And the real debate we'll have now would be, a lot of people would consider a second unit in that particular situation, in terms of managing time and family life and so on like that. To date, we've made the decision to stick with the primary milking platform and not step out into a second unit, spreading, limited resources, spreading our labour, and perhaps, placing too much of a burden on the labour available.
Okay, just in terms of, I suppose it's going to be a question that'll be on many people's minds maybe is, and I know when we'll be talking to Tig later, from talking to him in the past, that there's been a big lift in the last 12, 18 months, 2 years in the number of rotaries that are actually going through financing with them, and all the other banks as well. The decision to go for the rotary over the herringbone, was it an easy one, or did it take a bit of time to come to the...
Yeah, it definitely took a bit of time. We're milking 300 cows, and I would suggest, unless you're incredibly well resourced financially, 300 is the absolute minimum that you should consider a rotary at. Yeah, definitely we agonised for quite a period of time. Eventually we made the decision on the 50-pint rotary. Having done it, we're delighted. Like a lot of decisions we make in life, it can be a really big challenge to make them. But since we put in the parlour, February, 12 months, so we've pretty much 18 months almost, 2 lactations completed. It has completely transformed the working environment on our farm. The physical demands of milking that amount of cows through a restricted scale of a herringbone was just unsustainable. And we're at the start of, as I've mentioned already, a transition in terms of stepping from one generation to the next. So at this point we felt confident that we were putting in a facility that would hopefully function for a minimum of 25 or 30 years, as in a generation of farming. It's not something I would even have considered myself at my age, only for Enda had made a decision to join us on the farm.
Very good. And Conor, we'll come to you now. Since 2016, I suppose you've added land to the platform and increased numbers fairly significantly, really. So you can just run us through the journey.
Yeah, I suppose in 2016 we were milking 95 and 96 cows, rearing about 20 replacement heifers, so it's kind of 20% replacement rate. But we were breeding a lot more. We were selling a big amount of surplus heifer calves. So in 2017 then we got access to land next to the milking platform. In 2018 then we done some building work to accommodate extra cows, I suppose, put in a new collecting yard with a feed unit, and converted the old old centre passage in a slatted shed into cubicles, and in 2019 then we got access to more land, which allowed us to increase cow numbers significantly. So we went contract rearing as well in the meantime. We were at what heifers we could ourselves. We were at all the calves, and we send them out a bit like David started as yearlings for contract rearing, and we have moved to completely contract rearing this spring, so they're going 2 weeks old. We've moved up to 144 cows, so we have 50% increased in a couple of years. Yeah, so we're big.
You've done two big things there, I suppose, in terms of going to the contract rearing situation and also taking on the extra land in the one go. Have you found that a challenge in terms of financial? You would have been running a very efficient operation prior to that.
Yeah, it was. We didn't take on any extra borrowing, so we've done everything out of cash reserves and cash flow. It was working fine, but we hit a health problem last year, and we didn't sell as much milk solids as we thought, so it got tight enough in the last year. But other than that, we were very, I suppose we were disciplined in our spending on the land, and especially disciplined in our spending in the building. We didn't do anything fancy.
Yeah, so a little like Henry's said there, in relation to their situation, you're probably putting in hours in the parlour at the moment.
Yeah.
So you have hope to do something in that space in maybe 2 to 3 years' time.
In 2 to 3 years' time, yeah. Through the peak this year, I put in a lot of hours myself. I have a relief milker as well, does a good few milkings, but I put in a lot of hours in the parlour this spring. Yeah, I did.
So something similar, I suppose, Henry. You said, Conor, the day that we were down with you, that you kind of you've thrown labour at the problem in the short term. Is that something you would have done, Henry, as well?
Most definitely, and I think it's incredibly important that you stay with labour, because for the most part, labour is available if you pay it well and respect the labour. It is available, and you know, one of the great challenges for any of us is taking on significant debt. That's a burden that can overwhelm any of us, but for the most part, if you work with people and get on with people and create a good working environment, you will get the labour.
Very good. And David, I was on your farm 2 or 3 years ago, I think it was. We were looking at your parlour at the time, and you moved into, I think it's a 22 unit, is it? But you, again, similar to both of the lads here, you've done the hard yards in an older parlour at one stage too.
Well, we went from a 6 unit to a 22 unit the last year, and the 22 unit we were putting 90 cows through it, so that was fairly tedious, and building the new parlour at the same time. So nearly the good was gone out of the new parlour by the time we got to it, to be honest. It wasn't until the following year we got 22. It's effectively 7 rows, or it's 6 rows and 2 half rows generally the way it works out, and it's very, very comfortable. Yeah. Yeah.
So there's just one question for you, David, actually, in terms of how do you prevent system slip? So once you've got the cows milking it that you require, how do you stop yourself tinkering with the system really like?
I would say the biggest danger to any farmer is boredom, I'd say, when things are going well. So get yourself a pastime or look outside the farm and look at something else before you try and make things complicated for yourself.
Very good. Yeah. So Conor, I suppose in terms of growing the herd from organically, as we were saying just before we started, I suppose you had a lot of work to do on the outside land in terms of infrastructure, and I think a very important point to make is that you invested in roadways to access grass in the shoulders of the year as much to access the farms. There was a good bit of spending to be done, and you weren't really ready to take on the stock necessarily with that new land. So again, how did you prepare for that? Because you knew it was going to be a challenging period, I suppose, and you said then about hitting the health issue as well.
Yeah. Yeah, so like I said, we were breeding the cows to dairy anyhow. So we were getting the calves every spring. So we had the calves the first spring. So we kept the calves ourselves. We kept almost 50 calves the first year we got the land, and we grazed the calves on that old grass. Hadn't been grazed for about 12 or 15 years. So it was not the thing you would live maybe calves into, but look, we got away with it anyway. And that allowed us space to do that farm, to reseed and access that farm, put roadways and water into it, as I said. But then we had to look for somewhere to rear them. We knew we couldn't rear 50. We had enough land to rear 50 heifers. So we had to put them down the contract rearing route in the second season. So look, at that stage, we knew what we were doing and we could budget for it, that cost was going out. So that's really the way we had him. We just had him coming on. Then we had a big batch of them coming in just as the second land came on. So we actually had the second land stocked before we had it got, if you like.
Right.
And we went into that reseeding it in early April, and we had the cows in the ground milking at that stage. So we had a real high stocking rate in the spring of 19, which was a good spring to have a high stocking rate. We had a bit of luck, like every story. We had a bit of luck.